Okay, we are back in the park for episode 2. Today, instead of it being sunset, it looks like it suddenly might storm, which is news because it didn't say it was going to storm when I checked the weather app. I'm in a new spot. Let me see if I can show you a little bit more. It's like this beautiful multi-tree stump that has like 4 different offshoots of stump coming out of it. It's really beautiful and very grounding, which feels very appropriate because something I want to speak about today is staying grounded as you share on the internet. I don't think this was something that was like so much on my mind. I mean, it's definitely something I've had a lot of practice in, but this week I had an especially robust practice session as one of the tweets that I had posted went very viral into a less friendly side of the internet, which happens from time to time. It honestly doesn't happen that much to me because usually my takes just aren't that controversial. I certainly never attempted to quote unquote rage bait the internet, and comically this tweet seems to have done that completely unintentionally. I say comically because the nature of the thought or reflection that went viral in this way was essentially that I wish that there were more hopeful books in the world, especially now where I feel like the world is so saturated with stories of pain and suffering and connection over mutual suffering, and to an extent the glorification of suffering, that what I wish existed was more art that shows us how to transmute negative emotion and dark feeling and suffering and pain. Oh, raindrop just hit, so this might not last. Into something greater, into hope, into the sense that you can create your own fate and take the hand you've been dealt in life and do something miraculous with it, or even just survive it. The tweet was partially targeting the book A Little Life, which is very well known, was written in 2015, and was on my mind because I had just had a long conversation with a few friends, a couple of whom had read this book, and they shared the contents of this book, and then I went to Reddit and read more about the nature of this book and the nature of the author, and it just became very evident to me that, from my perspective, this book came from a very dark place, ended in a very dark place, the entire contents of it unfolded in a very dark place, and I just think there is an extent to which, as an author or as an artist, as a creative, you should take the responsibility of the kind of frequency that you're putting your audience or your reader or your consumer on very seriously. And I feel like this book is an example of maybe taking people to a place that they weren't ready to or prepared to have gone. And everyone's entitled to create whatever art they want. Everyone's entitled to consume whatever art they want. I am not for censoring art. I am merely suggesting that if you are someone with an artistic gift, I think what the world needs is people using those gifts to give people hope that there's something worth living for and that there's something good at the end of the tunnel of pain and suffering. Again, no one's obligated to do that. It's just something I'd love to see more of. And that's really what the spirit of the take was. However, this got pulled into sort of the mythical underworld of Twitter and was picked up by a bunch of people that essentially were very, very protective and defensive of stories that center pain and suffering and victimhood. I'm not so interested in actually getting into that thread and the take itself. I did expand a little bit on my thoughts in the thread. Ultimately, though, the tweet was directed at my audience, who has a lot more context and sense of where I'm coming from and understands that I am not categorically rejecting the idea of there being art exploring pain and suffering. In fact, I'm all about that. I just wish that people gave others the tools to move through that suffering and to help them transmute it instead of just focusing on being in the pain. What I am interested in exploring, though, is what it's like to be at the sort of like eye of this internet vortex and storm, and my observations of having experienced it a few times, having experienced both sides of it when you go viral positively on the internet, as well as times like this where maybe you get picked up by a crowd that doesn't resonate with what you've said or with you, with your persona. One interesting thing, like one thing you have to remember if you ever end up in a situation like this, is people are not getting mad at you, the person, the 3D fleshy version of me that's sitting on the earth right now and speaking to you. They're getting mad at an animated version of what I symbolize in that moment. So my impression is that people from that particular instance perceived me as someone who was trying to deny them the art that they wanted to consume, or deny that that art is valuable. And as a result, any kind of like anger or rage associated with like oppression or suppression kind of just gets funneled directly to the target. And if that target is you, you do end up kind of like in this mass projection field of other people's rage and anger. Now, if you can kind of like step away from that and like really just sort of like remove yourself into this observer seat and just watch the symbol that is you, like this pixel profile picture, like flat 2D version of you, just kind of like be dragged essentially by the internet, you can learn a lot about that behavior and about where it comes from. And I think for me, like the most important policy on these kinds of things is to not allow the frequency of people's anger to get inside of me, because that's just them winning. Like that's just the anger and the rage sort of pollinating itself into you and taking over your spirit and being. And to me, like ultimately, my message really does stand for the opposite of that. Like I really do want to live in a world where people are hopeful and where people see a future that they want to create, and they're creating things and they are passionate about the things they're creating, and we use our power and free will and agency and desires and ambitions and strength to create the outcomes that we want and the things that we want to see in the world. The main learning from this whole experience is if you can experience one of these storms and not succumb to the frequency at the heart of those storms and continue to connect and root to your own mission and your own message and what you stand for, then you've successfully solidified yourself as a person on the internet. Because if you're trying to spread anything honestly but like negative message on the internet, there will be times where you'll be pulled into a side of the internet that only wants to focus on that kind of messaging and content, and they will be angry and they will attack you and they will attempt to get you to do what they're doing, which is to just speak negatively and destructively. And if you can manage not to do it, you've won. You've succeeded at something. So another thing that I want to talk about is speaking as potently as you possibly can when you're trying to spread your message. Now, what I mean by that is sometimes we try to hedge what we're saying by trying to make sense to more people. We dilute our message. We say things with a bunch of qualifications. We honestly just don't trust the audience, don't trust the reader to understand what it is that we're trying to say. And a core part of applying this idea of speaking honestly and speaking directly to your audience is remembering that you aren't speaking to everyone. Part of the reason that this is kind of connected to the viral thing is that's a perfect example of me speaking with some degree of assumed context around who I'm speaking to. I wrote that tweet for my audience of like, whatever, a few tens of thousands of people, like not for the 9 million people that saw it that don't have the context on my worldview and my ideas to understand where I'm coming from. And even if they did, maybe they still wouldn't agree with me, which is fine. They're not really the people that I'm speaking to. So you do need to be willing to be misunderstood. You need to be willing to maybe even be disliked or hated in some cases by people who don't agree with you. But by speaking directly and potently to the people that will understand what you're saying, you also get to find your true people, and you get to make them feel seen. You get to make them feel sane. You get to make their ideas and their worldviews also feel seen and understood. And you get to empower them with ideas that you've taken the time to harness and crystallize and bring into the world more thoughtfully. So I think that if you're trying to be creative, or if you're trying to really spread any message in the world, whether that's persuasion and you're building a company and you want to get your narrative across, or whether you're writing, or whether you're creating art of any kind, you need to be clear about what it is that you're trying to say and who it is that you're trying to say it to, because you don't need to make sense to everyone and you don't need to speak to everyone. Everyone is not your audience. The people that are going to resonate with your unique frequency and the unique ideas that you have and the worldview you're trying to transmit to them are the people that you are trying to find. And they don't need infinite qualifications on everything that you say to understand where you're coming from. They will understand it if you trust them to understand it and to understand where you're coming from, if you speak honestly and directly from a place of truth. So say what you actually think. Don't say what you think in 10 times more words than you need to with 100 more qualifications than is necessary, so you avoid the risk of potentially offending anyone. There's no need to do that. The right people will understand it, the wrong people won't. That's inevitable anyway. You might as well get there faster with direct and honest communication. Another thing I want to speak on is how I feel about motherhood, the possibility of motherhood and children, and creativity, and how I see these things as being very connected. I was just listening to someone speak about how one of the reasons they don't want to have kids is because they want to be able to protect their capacity to create and make art and be an artist, and that is of higher priority to them than having children, which I respect everyone's different perspective on this, and I think that ultimately people that do have kids should want to have kids. I am interested in why so many people don't want to have kids though, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity to explore how we can entangle some of those narratives and return to what in my view is like one of the most natural desires. I mean, evidently it is biologically, but being human, which is to want to reproduce. When I think about motherhood, when I think about what it will mean to hopefully have my own children one day, it feels like it will be the greatest creative act of my life by far. Like everything is just going to be a prelude to that. And I don't intend to stop making art or my creative work when and if I become a mother. I expect that it will completely transform the way that I relate to everything else. But I really feel strongly that I am meant to create children and to raise children and to explore what it means to craft the mind of a being that isn't just you but is partially you, and to explore how that's going to change my relationship to everything in my life. I think it's going to be so fascinating to see consciousness emerge in something that was created by you, and to be able to rediscover the world through their eyes. I'm excited for the love that's going to come through and just the completely unique and indescribable feelings that come with it. I'm really blessed to come from a very large family, so I've watched a lot of people close to me become mothers and fathers that I've known since I was very little. I'm like one of the younger cousins in my stream of many cousins. My grandmother was very superstitious, so we never count. But so many of them have children now, and watching them be transformed by that experience is really quite something. And being exposed to so many babies and so many people having babies, it's just so obvious that we're meant to have babies. And so many of my cousins that stopped having babies because they didn't think they could provide like enough of a financial foundation for them, or rationalize themselves out of having more. Most of them seem to regret that and wish that they had even more. And I guess I share this because on the internet, sometimes I feel like maybe people are just lacking embodied examples of how to do this in a way that feels very nourishing and loving in their lives. And I do feel very blessed with many of those. So I think it's just worth talking about what I see. But I also think that I'm kind of exploring this new frontier of what it means to create a life that hopefully won't be dramatically compromised by becoming a mother. One of the reasons that I left my job that I had in venture capital and just generally the corporate world was because I didn't really see a path to motherhood that would fulfill me in that path. I knew I wanted to be a mother. That was absolutely undeniable for me. And so the idea of having a baby, taking a few months off, and then coming back to work and kind of just proceeding with everything as it had before, when my 9-month-old or 12-month-old was taking their first steps and speaking their first words at home, just didn't seem compelling to me. Didn't seem like the way I'd want to do it. And then I just keep doing that for a few more, and then I'm kind of behind in my career because I'm taking all this time out to be a mother, but I'm also kind of behind in being a mother because I'm taking all this time to be in my career. I'm sure people do it and they make it work, but it just didn't seem like the path that I wanted to do. But I think the way that I see what I'm doing now is these years I'm really investing in setting up a foundation for myself for the rest of my life. I view building my audience and building my creative practice and building whatever ways that creative practice is going to support me and the services and offerings that I can provide as this foundation for how this evolving expression of myself, my business, my creative practice will evolve with me, through the different phases of my life, through being a mother, through being an older woman, through being, young, through being all of these things. And that was very intentional. That was very premeditated. Part of the reason that I'm doing all of this is because I wanted my work to be able to be an expression of me at every phase of my life. And one of those phases is hopefully going to be motherhood. And it's going to look different during that phase. But I'm really excited by this idea of creating an entity in my work that can carry me through these different phases. And, I'm figuring this out as I go. It's not like I have a map and know what everything is going to look like. But I'm putting in the work now to build a vehicle that will be able to continue operating and running and supporting my life as I go through these different phases, and will be there for me when I'm ready to return to it during and after and in the midst of child rearing, I hope. So I guess I just say this to share my perspective, which is that being a creative and being a mother, I don't think need to necessarily be this divorced thing. And I am exploring this realm of motherhood nurturing my creative practice, and my creative practice nurturing my capacity to be a mother, and seeing how these things can agree and intertwine. And sometimes I feel like I shouldn't really talk about this because I'm not a mother and, I'm just not in that phase yet. But I don't know, I do feel like to get into that phase, you need to want to be in that phase. And there's a lot of young men and women who don't seem to want that badly to be in that phase. And so they're likely not going to listen to me when I'm in that phase. So I might as well talk about it now. I think I was also just really lucky to have really loving parents, and to have gotten so much from them and just feel so deeply in my bones, no rational internet argument could ever talk me out of it, that it is my responsibility to transmit that love to another being through parenthood myself. And it's not something I just feel obligated to do. It's something I want to do desperately and am so excited to do. And I understand that that's just not everyone's experience. But I also think there's interesting questions around how that kind of love can be unlocked in us as adults if it's not just kind of there and waiting to be transferred into the next generation. And I do think that's a lot of what I like to explore in my work, is just what's blocking any of us from feeling extreme connection and love. And how can we get closer to the place where the primary thing we want to do is just express ourselves and express our love for others and for possible other beings we could create in any way, in the highest capacity and highest impact way we can. And again, that's how I see it as all connected, because I do believe my creative work is a version of that. Like, I see my creative work as my channel for expressing my ideas, love, light, like, into the world. And I just think having a child and raising it will be another version of that. And I think being creative has only made me more excited to be a mother, because it's just so obvious to me that, you know, ideas are babies. These creative projects you give birth to, like, you're nurturing them, you're nursing them. I know, I'm sure they're far less demanding than babies and, you know, keep you up less. But I just really am curious about, like, the intertwining worlds of creativity and self-expression and having a baby. I'll keep you posted. The next thing I'm talking about, I'm calling the Larry Ellison paradox. I've been reading this biography of Larry Ellison, who is the founder and was the CEO of Oracle for a while. I think now he's maybe the CTO. He was like the second richest man in the world to Bill Gates for a while in the 90s, and he's very successful and has been very successful and is just kind of a clear weapon, legend in the business world, and has created a lot of shareholder value. He's created one of the biggest software companies in the world. He's 80 years old now, and he is married to his fifth wife, who is 33 years old. And I mostly just think that this paradigm is kind of like an interesting thematic exploration. Like, first of all, no judgment at all. I'm just interested in this question of, like, why is it so hard for very successful people to find the one, like, to find a successful relationship and to stay in it? And, you know, in this biography I'm reading, he's on his third wife. Like, it was written, I think, in the early 2000s. And even then, he just said, like, I think I'm just not a very good husband, or I'm just, like, not as good at being a husband, obviously, as I am at these other things. And I just think it's an interesting tension, because a lot of the people that I work with in my one-on-one coaching and client work are not quite Larry Ellison level, but, you know, really successful people who have built organizations or are building organizations or are moving up in organizations and are really good at, like, this whole material world thing, like just accomplishing things, achieving things, creating value, getting things that they want out of life. And a lot of them really struggle with love and, like, with relationships and with finding the right person and with being the right person in that relationship and with choosing the right person and with making the space for that person and all of these things. And I think there's just so much there. There's so much to explore there. And it's something I want to think and write about a lot more. But even reading about the way that Larry Ellison approached business, it kind of made sense to me, like, why his approach wouldn't work so well in relationships. Like, he was, like, really good in crisis mode, really good when there was, like, a novel problem to be solved, but, like, didn't like the mundane everyday of, like, running a business, didn't like the, like, kind of repetitive maintenance of running a business, and was never, like, content when he was in a role that demanded that from him. And in a way, like, a relationship, a marriage there's a lot of analogs probably to, like, building a very long, like, decades long organization. And a lot of that, the contents of that relationship is going to be, like, maintenance and repetition and staying devoted and staying connected to your partner even when it's not, like, crisis mode or novelty mode or, like, honeymoon phase or limerence. And a lot of the love is just, like, safe and healthy and stable. And I suppose I'm exploring the question of whether sometimes, like, the skill set that helps people be very high achieving in the material world can keep them from like settling into a stable, healthy relationship. Like they're almost looking for the fight or flight. They're looking for the sense of unease. And I think a lot of like long-term love and healthy relationships is just about really investing in what you have and paying attention to what you have, and like not getting, you know, too enchanted by what you don't have and by someone else that's caught your attention or something that you wish was in the relationship that wasn't. Like you can collaborate with your partner on creating the shared vision that you both want, and that's, I think, in many ways what a healthy relationship looks like. But if you're always looking for novelty, then yeah, you're probably not going to stay in the same relationship very long, because I have written about this. Like I do think you get a lot of novelty out of commitment. I think when you are in a committed anything, when you're committed to being in a city, committed to being in a job, committing to being in a relationship, there are things that come through that commitment, through like the depths of how deeply you're meeting that thing you're in a commitment with, that person you might be in a commitment with, on, that shows you new sides of yourself and each other and like the capacity for connection. But they're not like the flashy kind of novelty that people glorify and look for, that comes with kind of just being in a new relationship every whatever year or getting the newest shiny thing. I'm really interested in how people can feel safe enough in their life to surrender to what's coming their way and to be connected to what is already present, and to realize the sense of nourishment and the sense of safety and love that they can get from what is already in front of them. And also to be able to identify the kind of person that's going to be there for them in a stable way, in a healthy way, in times where they aren't like the flashy superstar or celebrity way, but just like genuinely loves them, like loves the spirit that they are, loves the being that they are. And I think when you become like a very successful person, a larger than life personality, a very magnetic, charismatic, kind of desired object, especially in the business world, it's hard to even identify when someone's like really connecting with you for the you that you truly are, versus, you know, the idea of who you are, or this shiny version of you that isn't going to like be the thing that they go to sleep with and wake up with and go through hard times with. And I think that's what a lot of relationships are. It's like you need to be able to be in the like the regulated nervous system moments together when things aren't demanding the highest octane version of you. And if you're someone who's really good at achieving things and accomplishing things, maybe you're just not that used to occupying that kind of down-regulated nervous system version of yourself that would come through in a healthy relationship. And so perhaps the ways to find the person that you can kind of really stay with and intertwine your life with and braid it all together with is a matter of practicing being in that state, practicing being in a grounded, healthy, regulated, not seeking, but like genuinely locating your power from within yourself and feeling content within yourself state, so that you can find the person that's attracted to you in that state, so that you can live your life in that state and not just kind of magnetically pull someone in when you're in this very like flashy, high octane state. One of my favorite books that I read recently was Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. I'm obsessed with Coco Mellors' writing. She's only written 2 books, but I love them both, and I'll be reading more whenever she publishes more. And there was this really amazing excerpt. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll put it up on the screen. I don't remember it off by heart, but she had this amazing excerpt at the end of the book that was kind of about this main character who was like this very flashy, magnetic, kind of ad executive businessman in New York, writing about how he'd met this person who was like able to really just be grounded within herself, and described her as like not doing this tap dance to get love like these sparkly magnetic people often feel they have to do. Like she's just not trying to work so hard to get you to like her. She's just happy. She's just content with who she is. She doesn't need you to like her. And how eventually, if you've been doing the tap dance for your whole life to like get people to like you, get people to notice you, you might just get tired. Like the shoes might not fit anymore. And when you stop dancing, like you want to be there with someone who's like willing to be there with you even when you're not in this flashy magnetic state. And I don't know Larry Ellison, so I'm not going to comment on his situation, but I think picking a partner, if you want that partner to last, to really last, and to be there with you indefinitely, there is a necessity to practice being in that calm, grounded, authentic, true state, who you really are. There is a need to be who you really are, so that they can meet you there and that you can build a relationship together with both of you being in that place. And I think that's where like the most nourishing and beautiful love forms, is when no one's trying to prove anything to each other. They're just together. They're just in love, and they're willing to be their most natural, silly, authentic, raw, honest selves. And I think there's hope for everyone, you know. I think there's hope for the people who have been married 5 times. I just think it's about recognizing your patterns and recognizing who you're picking and why things don't work out, and recognizing, you know, owning whether like you really do want a partner or a person that's going to last multiple decades, and if you do want like kind of a conventionally monogamous relationship and all these things. But if you do want those things, then I think kind of becoming the version of yourself that you want to be in that relationship and that you want to attract that person with is really important. And the practices for getting there, well, you know, look within yourself. Like, what aren't you looking at? What is keeping you away from being in this grounded, settled, neutral, loving state? What aren't you looking at? What patterns are you avoiding? What parts of yourself scare you? And do you escape from with relationships, with other things? You can do that in a lot of ways. Writing, meditation, yoga, slowing down, reflection. You can work with someone to look at your patterns and your narratives. That is a lot of the work that I do with my clients. But you can also do a lot of it on your own. I have a journaling guide that's free on my website that can be like a helpful guide inwards if you're just starting out. But you could also just open a notebook that you have and prompt yourself to reflect and take a look at some things that keep coming up in your life that confuse you. Start to try and understand them. Start to try and understand what triggers them, the patterns. If you say you want something but you act in a way that brings you other things, you know, what's happening there? What's the conflict there? What's the inner conflict? And then asking these questions and really like earnestly investigating the answers does bring you to the state where you can kind of attract your highest frequency, highest potential partner who can meet you on all the different dimensions of yourself, because you will have met yourself there already. I wrote this piece a while ago called Let Yourself Be Loved, and it's just about, you know, you'll only ever let someone love you as deeply as you've loved yourself, and you'll only ever let someone meet you on levels that you've already met yourself. And you can unearth these things together too in a relationship. You can go deeper together in a relationship, but you still need to be willing to go there, like yourself, in those contexts. You can't connect with someone in a place within yourself that you're not willing to go. So I think if someone's been really successful in their career and gotten a lot of praise for things that never had to do with, you know, romance or love or connection or self-awareness, like they're not incentivized to have grown and developed in those ways, and it's an opportunity for them to conduct that growth themselves, to prioritize that, to find the right resources to do that growth, and then use that and harness that to find the person that is meant for them and that they can build a relationship with. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. This was beautiful. I really enjoyed being in the park. I enjoyed sitting with you on this warm, sunny, cloudy, almost stormy day and sharing some reflections and thoughts. I really like this format. It's fun, it's playful. Sometimes I'm not sure how much you guys get out of this kind of format relative to my writing, but if it's continuing to be valuable and interesting, I will continue to do it. And if you want to see me talk about other things, then just let me know. I'm really open to topic suggestions. If you want to learn more about my work, my one-on-one coaching work, you can visit isabelunraveled.com. Almost everything you'll need is there. You can DM me. It's a great path. Twitter, Substack. You can find my writing at read.isabelunraveled.com and Isabel Unraveled on all the relevant platforms. I'm now posting to YouTube too, which is great. And I think it's starting to rain, so that's my cue. This was lovely. Talk soon. Have a beautiful day. Stay safe. Protect your frequency, protect your energy, and hope you're thriving. Hope you're enjoying life.